January 20th, 1961. A cold winter morning in Washington, D.C. A 43-year-old senator from Massachusetts steps up to the podium and delivers words that would define a generation. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, charismatic, visionary, controversial, became America's youngest elected president. But his story goes far beyond those famous 16 words. Today, more than 60 years after his assassination, new revelations continue to emerge. In March 2025, the final classified documents were released, offering fresh insights into one of America's most scrutinized presidencies. Who was John F. Kennedy? What did he achieve? And why, after all these decades, do we still grapple with questions about his life and death? Let's dive deep into the Kennedy files. Born into privilege on May 29, 1917, Kennedy grew up in a world of wealth and political ambition. The Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, the family sailing together, the image of American aristocracy. His father, Joseph Kennedy Sr., was a successful businessman and diplomat who harbored presidential dreams. Initially for his eldest son, Joe Jr. Joseph Sr. had grand plans. He would create a political dynasty that would reshape America. But sometimes, destiny has other plans. Tragedy struck in World War II. Joe Jr. died in a secret mission over Europe, a dangerous experimental bombing run that went horribly wrong. And John, who had already become a war hero himself after the PT-109 incident, suddenly inherited the family's political aspirations. Think about this for a moment. The shy, sickly child who spent much of his youth in hospitals had transformed into a charismatic leader who would capture the world's attention. The PT-109 story itself is legendary. When Kennedy's patrol boat was rammed by a Japanese destroyer in the Solomon Islands, he swam for hours, towing an injured crewman by holding a life jacket strap in his teeth. This wasn't just heroism, this was the making of a myth. Kennedy's rise through Congress and the Senate was meteoric. He married Jacqueline Bouvier in 1953, creating America's closest equivalent to royalty. The wedding photos, the glamour, the sophistication. America had never seen anything quite like it. But it was the 1960 presidential campaign that changed American politics forever. Picture this: September 26, 1960, Chicago, Illinois, the first ever televised presidential debate. Two men, two visions for America, and a medium that would reshape politics forever. Television became the new battleground. Kennedy arrived looking tanned, rested, confident. Nixon, recovering from a hospital stay, appeared pale and tired. Kennedy wore makeup and understood television's power. Nixon refused makeup and underestimated the visual impact. Here's what's fascinating. Those who watched on TV thought Kennedy won decisively. Radio listeners favored Nixon. The medium had literally become the message. In that single moment, American politics shifted from substance to style, from radio to television, from the old guard to the new frontier. This wasn't just about appearance. It revealed Kennedy's understanding of a changing America. He grasped something profound. In the television age, leadership would be as much about inspiration as administration. Kennedy's inaugural address introduced America to the new frontier, a vision of progress, exploration, and global leadership. But the reality of governing proved far more complex than campaign rhetoric. Let that sink in for a moment. Just months into his presidency, Kennedy faced the Bay of Pigs disaster, a CIA-planned invasion of Cuba that ended in humiliating failure. The newly released 2025 documents reveal even more troubling details about the CIA's operations during this period, showing the complex web of intelligence activities that surrounded Kennedy's decisions. These files show us something chilling. Kennedy inherited plans that were already in motion. Intelligence operatives who believed they knew better than the elected president. A shadow government that would continue to operate regardless of who sat in the Oval Office. The Bay of Pigs wasn't just a foreign policy disaster. It was Kennedy's introduction to the real power structures in Washington. the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower had warned about just days before Kennedy took office. But Kennedy learned from this failure, and that lesson would soon save the world. October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, the world teetered on the brink of nuclear war. Imagine this scene: the Oval Office, October 16, 1962. CIA Director John McCone walks in with photographs, aerial reconnaissance showing Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba. Nuclear missiles, 90 miles from Florida. Kennedy's advisors were split. The Joint Chiefs wanted immediate military action. Some called for a full invasion of Cuba. Others suggested surgical airstrikes. The Hawks were circling, pushing for war. But Kennedy had learned something from the Bay of Pigs debacle. Sometimes the experts are wrong. Sometimes the generals don't understand the full picture. Here's what the 2025 documents reveal. The crisis was even more dangerous than we knew. Soviet commanders in Cuba had tactical nuclear weapons, and permission to use them if communications with Moscow were cut. We came closer to nuclear war than anyone imagined. Kennedy's measured response, combining firmness with diplomacy, literally saved millions of lives. While his advisors pushed for military action, Kennedy chose a naval blockade. He gave Khrushchev room to back down without losing face. The secret negotiations, the back-channel communications through intermediaries, the delicate dance of nuclear diplomacy. This wasn't just crisis management, this was statesmanship at its finest. When it was over, Kennedy had aged visibly. The weight of possibly ending civilization, it changes a person. Domestically, Kennedy initially moved cautiously on civil rights, fearing Southern Democrats' backlash. This is where the mythology meets reality. Kennedy wasn't initially the civil rights champion we remember. He needed Southern votes. He needed to maintain the Democratic coalition. Political calculation sometimes trumped moral conviction. But sometimes, history forces your hand. May 1963, Birmingham, Alabama. Americans watched in horror as police used dogs and fire hoses against peaceful protesters. Children, teenagers, beaten and arrested for demanding basic human rights. The images were devastating. America's moral authority in the Cold War was crumbling. How could we champion freedom abroad while denying it at home? Kennedy could no longer remain cautious. In June 1963, he delivered a landmark civil rights address, calling it a moral issue. Listen to his words. "We are confronted primarily with a moral issue, as old as the scriptures and as clear as the American Constitution." This wasn't political calculation anymore. This was moral leadership. Kennedy had evolved from cautious politician to champion of justice. Perhaps no single decision better captured Kennedy's vision than his bold commitment to landing Americans on the moon. May 25, 1961, before a joint session of Congress, Kennedy made a promise that seemed impossible. "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." The audacity was breathtaking. America had put a man in space for just 15 minutes. The Soviet Union was dominating space exploration. We were losing the space race, badly. But Kennedy understood something profound. Great nations need great challenges. "We choose to go to the moon," he declared at Rice University. "Not because it is easy, but because it is hard." It was quintessential Kennedy, ambitious, inspiring, and seemingly impossible. This wasn't just about beating the Soviets. It was about proving that free societies could achieve the extraordinary. The moon landing would happen 6 years after his death, but it bore his fingerprints, his vision, his impossible dream made real. November 22, 1963, Dallas, Texas. A routine political trip became America's defining tragedy. The morning started perfectly. Clear skies, enthusiastic crowds. Kennedy was riding high. His approval ratings were strong. The 1964 election looked promising. Jackie Kennedy, radiant in her pink Chanel suit, charmed everyone she met. At Love Field Airport, she was presented with yellow roses of Texas. The crowds were warm, welcoming. Dallas, despite its reputation as a conservative stronghold, seemed to embrace the young president. 12:30 p.m. Central Time, Dealey Plaza. The presidential motorcade turns onto Elm Street. Shots ring out. 3 shots in 6 seconds. The president slumps forward. Jackie crawls onto the trunk of the limousine, reaching for something. Secret Service agent Clint Hill leaps onto the moving car. "My God, they've killed him," cries Roy Kellerman. At Parkland Hospital, doctors fight desperately to save the president's life, but the wounds are too severe. At 1 p.m., President Kennedy is pronounced dead. He was 46 years old. His presidency lasted just 1,036 days. The nation stopped. Television networks suspended regular programming for 4 days. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, removed his glasses and struggled to maintain composure as he announced the president's death. Lyndon Johnson was sworn in aboard Air Force One with a blood-stained Jacqueline Kennedy by his side. The images burned into America's collective memory. The end of innocence. Within hours, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested. 2 days later, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot Oswald on live television, silencing the alleged assassin forever. The Warren Commission concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. 7 men, led by Chief Justice Earl Warren, spent 10 months examining evidence, interviewing witnesses, reconstructing the events of that terrible day. But questions persisted and multiplied. The magic bullet theory, the grassy knoll, the mysterious deaths of witnesses. For 6 decades, researchers have dissected every detail, every document, every witness account. Was there a second shooter? Did the CIA know more than they revealed? What about the mafia connections? The anti-Castro Cuban exiles? The military-industrial complex that Kennedy had begun to challenge? Oliver Stone's 1991 film JFK reignited these questions, dramatizing the conspiracy theories and demanding release of classified documents. Now, in 2025, the final classified files have been released under the latest presidential directive. While they don't reveal a smoking gun or confirm wild conspiracy theories, they do provide what one Harvard historian called enhanced clarity on CIA actions and the broader context of Kennedy's assassination. These documents reveal more about the intelligence operations of the era, the surveillance of Oswald, and the complex relationships between various government agencies. They show a government bureaucracy that was often chaotic, sometimes incompetent, but not necessarily conspiratorial. But they also underscore a sobering truth. Some questions about November 22, 1963 may never be fully answered. What remains of Kennedy's legacy? His presidency, though brief, fundamentally changed America. He ushered in the modern television age of politics, where image and substance became inseparable. Every president since has been measured against Kennedy's media mastery, his charismatic appeal. His initiatives lived on through Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the moon landing in 1969, the Peace Corps, all bore Kennedy's fingerprints. His call for Americans to serve something greater than themselves inspired a generation. The Peace Corps alone has sent more than 240,000 volunteers to serve in 142 countries. It remains one of America's most successful soft power initiatives. Kennedy's vision of service made real. But in 2025, some wonder what remains of Kennedy's Camelot. Recent analysis suggests we're undoing much of what Kennedy built: the safety net, the civil rights framework, the global vision of lifting nations from poverty. Yet Kennedy's core message endures. His challenge to accept responsibility for government and society still resonates. From climate activism to social justice movements, young Americans continue to heed his call: ask what you can do for your country. His approach to international diplomacy, combining strength with dialogue, remains relevant in an era of global challenges. Kennedy's handling of the missile crisis offers lessons for modern leaders facing nuclear tensions and international crises. At Arlington National Cemetery, an eternal flame marks John F. Kennedy's grave. Nearby lies his brother Robert, assassinated 5 years later while seeking the presidency himself. 2 lives cut short, 2 visions interrupted. The flame has burned continuously since November 25, 1963. Through storms, through seasons, through the decades of change that followed. It's fitting, because Kennedy's ideas refused to be extinguished. Kennedy once said, "A man may die, nations may rise and fall, but an idea lives on." His ideas, service, courage, the pursuit of impossible dreams, remain as vital today as they were 60 years ago. In a world still grappling with division, inequality, and global challenges, perhaps we need Kennedy's optimism more than ever. Not the mythology of Camelot, but the challenging reality of his words. The call to build a better world, together. The files may be released, the documents declassified, the secrets revealed, but the mystery of John F. Kennedy isn't found in government archives. It lives on, in the eternal flame, and in the question he posed to every American. What can you do for your country?